Ukraine hits back and the results are stunning. Our defenders break through enemy lines and liberate 3 villages in just one day. While Russia throws everything it has, missiles, drones and chaos, Ukraine keeps pushing forward. And now the United States joined the flight for peace. Washington promises to back European peacekeepers in Ukraine with air support and intelligence. Russia's offensive is burning out, Ukraine's army is on the move, and the West is stepping in stronger than ever. Welcome to Ukraine Today. I'm Zoroslava Kolesnikova, and this is where the truth hits hardest. Ukrainian forces break through 3 villages, liberated in one day. The Ukrainian army is advancing in giant strides. While Putin's troops spend months fighting for every meter, our defenders are moving fast. In just one day, Ukraine's forces recaptured 3 villages, a stunning blow to the Kremlin's second army of the world. It is the start of a major counteroffensive that could finally push the occupiers out.
The Ukrainian armed forces are advancing against the enemy in giant strides, at least by Kremlin standards. While Putin's army spends months fighting for every village, our defenders are achieving what once seemed impossible. In just a single day, they managed to recapture as many as 3 Ukrainian villages from the Russian army. We're talking about the settlement of Sukhitskoye and 2 other villages in the Pokrovsk direction, Kucherov Yar and Uyut.
Thus, as of August 21st, 2025, the situation in this sector has been stabilized. Control has been restored over 9 settlements, and another 9 have been cleared of enemy sabotage groups. In just the past 10 days, 1,756 enemy soldiers and 75 pieces of enemy equipment have been destroyed here.
The occupiers also suffered huge losses in their attempt to break through the Ukrainian front line in a neighboring sector of the front. For example, fighters of the 33rd Brigade repelled a massive mechanized assault in the area of Vladimirovka, Donetsk region. During the battle, the weather conditions were poor, which did not play into the occupiers' hands. At least 3 enemy armored vehicles got stuck in the swamp, and the infantry that began to disembark from them came under fire from artillery drones. At one point, even a HIMARS joined in to repel the Russian attack. As a result of the battle, the enemy lost 3 armored vehicles destroyed, 3 drowned, and most of their infantry. Nevertheless, the Russian army does not give up hope of breaking through our defenses at least somewhere along the front at any cost, even if it means hundreds or thousands of their soldiers killed.
Every day, basically, there is news that the armed forces have locally pushed out the enemy here or liberated territory there. In all directions, essentially, they are repelling some large-scale enemy attacks. Every day, dozens of attacks are carried out in different directions.
The enemy is especially desperate to drive the armed forces of Ukraine out of Pokrovsk. Enemy sabotage groups have been storming the positions of the Ukrainian armed forces there around the clock without stopping for the past several days. The situation in this direction remains extremely difficult for the Ukrainian armed forces. Nevertheless, despite all the enemy's efforts, our defenders are bravely holding the defense of Pokrovsk.
The defense of Pokrovsk has been holding for over a year now. Over a year, just think about it. How many thousands of Russians have died there? Losses exceed 200,000. These are officially confirmed losses, according to figures from foreign intelligence agencies. Another question, how much Russian equipment have Russian generals lost in this direction? The generals have lost their epaulets.
The Pokrovsk direction is the main topic of conversation for Russian propaganda. But when it comes to their so-called achievements on other parts of the front, Kremlin propaganda prefers not to talk about it. You're unlikely to see footage like this on TV across the border. Within minutes of detection, the border guards from the Guard Brigade's reconnaissance and strike UAV groups completely destroy yet another enemy position. As a result, the occupiers lost at least 2 of their tanks, a vehicle, an antenna, electronic warfare equipment, and a significant portion of their personnel in the southern Slobozhanshchina direction. Despite all their efforts, the Russians have not managed to achieve a single significant victory, either on the ground or in the air. The only thing the occupiers seem to excel at is creating weapons of mass terror against civilians. A vivid example of this is the barbaric raid on wind turbines near Kramatorsk. These are clearly civilian critical infrastructure facilities. In this way, the Russians destroyed a third wind power station in Kramatorsk. Previously, the occupiers attacked wind turbines on October 22nd and 24th. Endless air raids on Ukrainian cities may become the Kremlin's new tactic. To this end, Russia is actively testing more and more new types of its own drones. For example, UAVs with a ring wing. An unusual enemy drone was detected by a Ukrainian anti-aircraft drone. Its exact purpose has not yet been determined. However, it is assumed that it could have performed both reconnaissance and strike missions. Overall, in just the past week alone, the enemy has sent at least 1,200 UAVs toward Ukraine, dropped more than 1,360 guided aerial bombs, and used more than 50 missiles of various types.
Every strike by Russia is an attempt to inflict as much harm as possible on ordinary life. This week, these are strikes on residential buildings, on our people, on children, on civilian infrastructure. This is the main target for the Russians. Thousands of strikes with different types of weapons in just 1 week.
However, military analysts assure that Ukraine's response to Russian terror is also not far off.
Ukraine was, is, and will be, and sooner or later, Ukrainian Tomahawks will definitely meet Russian decision-making centers.
While the American Tomahawks are still on their way, the Security Service of Ukraine has shown off its own new developments.
We are handing over this remarkable Magura B-7, which has already achieved a number of victories.
The drone was purchased with donations from Ukrainians as part of a large-scale fundraising campaign joined by local artists, influencers, and athletes.
This strike marine drone is the first in the world to have destroyed aerial targets.
Thanks to just one such marine drone, the occupiers can potentially suffer tremendous losses, which the SSU promises to report in its upcoming video updates.
Massive Russian strike, Ukraine under fire again. Ukraine is once again in enemy sight. Russia launched a massive wave of missiles and drones targeting cities and infrastructure across the country. On the front line, the situation is especially tense in the Pokrovsk direction, where fire battles continue and the occupiers are throwing in all their forces to hold their ground. Will Ukraine's defense hold firm, or is Moscow preparing for something even bigger?
Ukraine is once again under the occupiers' crosshairs. The Russians have launched a massive attack with missiles and drones. Tensions are also rising on the front line. The most difficult situation remains in the Pokrovsk direction, where the intensity of fighting is high. A large number of occupiers are concentrated there. The Russians are trying to gain a foothold by any means necessary.
The main tactic of the Russian small assault groups is to try to create an operational encirclement of Ukraine's defense forces directly in Pokrovsk itself. At the moment, the actual line of contact is at the key defensive positions of Ukraine's defense forces, the so-called citadel. Despite the extremely difficult situation, Ukraine's defense forces are carrying out successful counteroffensive actions, and at the moment, the area under the control of Ukraine's defense forces has increased to 200 square kilometers.
Fierce fighting continues in the Kupiansk area of the Kharkiv region. The occupiers are trying to gain a foothold in the northern part of the city. However, there is no question of any encirclement of Ukrainian troops. The situation in Minograd and its surroundings is also fully controlled by the Ukrainian armed forces.
At the moment, the main efforts of the occupiers are not aimed at blocking Ukraine's defense forces directly in Kupiansk, but rather at the possibility of breaking through to the Kupiansk logistics hub. The occupiers need control over this key railway station in order to use the short logistics route from the territory of the Russian Federation and the occupied areas of Luhansk region to form a strike group, whose goal will be to advance along the Oskil River toward the Slovyansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration.
Meanwhile, Putin has come out with a new scare tactic. The bunker dweller continues to talk about the successful tests of Russia's so-called wonder weapon.
This is an underwater, unmanned underwater device, which is called Poseidon, and it is also equipped with a nuclear power unit for the first time. we were able to successfully not only launch the system from the carrier submarine using the booster engine, but also to start up the nuclear power unit.
But Putin did not provide any evidence of the tests. No information about the location, route, duration, or any other details was disclosed.
Neither the Poseidon nor accordingly the Burevestnik have been put into mass production or placed on combat duty. Therefore, there is absolutely no reason to talk about any threat from these mythological Russian Wunderwaffe to NATO or directly to the United States.
But despite this, the ALCO President Medvedev called the Poseidon a doomsday weapon and at the same time threatened Belgium with a nuclear strike. Let us recall that the Belgian Minister of Defense stated that if Russia strikes the country's capital, NATO members will wipe Moscow off the face of the earth.
These are in essence nothing more than mere information stunts or publicity maneuvers, which the Western allies over time have completely stopped reacting to or even acknowledging in any significant way. And the reaction of the Russian Federation's ambassador to Belgium in response to the statement made by that country's defense minister is quite telling and revealing, as it clearly demonstrates a state of complete confusion, lack of preparedness, and an inability to respond adequately to such a tough, direct, and unequivocal statement coming from one of the NATO bloc members, which is a significant and influential alliance.
Against the backdrop of the Kremlin dictator's loud statements, Donald Trump has moved to action. The American president instructed the Pentagon to resume nuclear weapons testing.
On the nuclear weapons test of the United States, this is a strong and resolute military response from the country and President Trump to such information stunts by the Russian Federation. Moreover, Trump stated very firmly that the United States possesses the world's leading nuclear capability. Russia is in second place and China is conditionally third.
At the same time, the US has begun a large-scale reduction of its military presence in Eastern Europe.
On the one hand, while announcing such plans during the rotation period, I want to emphasize once again, the United States is increasing its nuclear presence in European countries. Let me emphasize again, this includes the redeployment of nuclear arsenals to the United Kingdom, the redeployment of nuclear submarines, and the presence of an American aircraft carrier in Denmark's territorial waters. In other words, all of this actually indicates a significant strengthening of the US military presence right near the border with the Russian Federation.
US to back European peacekeepers in Ukraine. Air and intelligence support promised. America is stepping in to secure Ukraine's future. According to the Financial Times, the US will provide strategic support for European peacekeepers, including air power and intelligence. Washington is ready to help Europe protect peace on Ukrainian soil, marking a new phase of Western unity against Russian aggression. It is the foundation of a new global security alliance and the final step toward real peace.
The United States of America will make its strategic contribution to security guarantees for Ukraine. This was reported to the Financial Times by high-ranking European officials.
Financial Times. The US has promised Europe support for peacekeepers in Ukraine with air support and intelligence.
It is reported that Washington is ready to support the presence of European allies in Ukraine with intelligence information and by protecting Ukrainian airspace.
Europe is planning to provide Ukraine with significant security guarantees, and they have to do it because they are right there. We will be involved as a backup resource. We are going to help them.
It is very important that the United States has realized that without guarantees, Ukraine will not agree to implement not just some of Putin's wishes, but won't even sit down at the table to discuss them. Because, to completely give up the entire Donetsk region, even those significant cities that are currently not occupied, what exactly would be the purpose of that?
The willingness of the US to contribute is a very important signal for Europe. Over the past few months, leaders of European countries have declared their readiness to participate in a peacekeeping mission on the ground and in the air, with the caveat that support from Washington is essential.
Europe must play its part, and I am ready to consider the possibility of deploying British forces on the ground alongside others. But there must be US support because the security guarantee from the US is the only way to effectively deter Russia from attacking Ukraine again.
At this point, the discussion is about the White House providing assistance with logistics, command and control of troops, intelligence and surveillance, all the areas in which the potential European contingent is most dependent on the US.
In fact, what is being discussed is that the United States has given the green light to European countries for a possible peacekeeping operation scenario on the territory of Ukraine. And let me remind you, more than 10 countries have declared their readiness to provide troops from their own armies to carry out a peacekeeping operation on Ukrainian territory.
It is also reported that there will be support with military equipment, particularly air defense systems, which will provide cover for European forces in Ukraine.
The military component will be accompanied by the United States of America. In other words, the United States will take on the task of assembling the mission. Of course, at the expense of the Europeans, but that's already significant because the mission has to be assembled from somewhere. Where else can you get it? If Europe doesn't have enough of its own military production, in order to do this as quickly as possible and implement those very security guarantees, the United States is in fact the only viable country.
In addition, after the end of hostilities, Washington will provide its own aircraft and ground-based radars, which will help ensure an air shield over Ukraine.
This already involves the use of the aviation component, which will nullify the ability of the Russian occupation army to use the aerospace forces of the occupying country when launching missile and bomb strikes both against logistics infrastructure and accordingly against peaceful Ukrainian cities.
The issue of reliable security guarantees is key for Ukraine. Without American support, there can be no talk of any reliability at all. In addition to the European peacekeeping contingent, the Russian aggressor will have to reckon with American military equipment, aviation and intelligence information.
That's all for today on Ukraine Today. If you stand with truth, like, share and subscribe to keep Ukrainians' voice strong. Your support helps us fight lies, expose the Kremlin's propaganda and bring the world the facts. Stay informed, stay strong and stay with Ukraine.